let's get started on who you think some impact players could be on FSU's defense heading into the 2025 season.
And guys that were there when I was there, 21, 22, 23. So,
or that were recruited for the 2024 roster when you were there.
Sure enough. How about this? I'm going to attack this on all three levels. I'll start up front because it all starts up front, as we all know. So I'll start up there in the front four, then I'll go to the second level, and then I'll go to the back end because three guys pop to mind when you ask that question. Up front, I'm going to start with Daniel Lyons. Danny Lyons, been in the program several years now, was stuck behind some talented guys. But Danny, much like we talked about Daryl and some of the attributes that you get with Daryl in the field, Danny is similar in a whole different way. What I mean by similar in a whole different way is, when we first got there, when he first came in, he was the guy that if you said, okay, let's squint our eyes, really thought he had as much upside as anybody we recruited. Josh Farmer, Pat Payton, all those guys that have been through that program when I was there. And really the length, the athleticism, he's really the most superior athlete to me up front of those big guys. The thing that has probably held Danny back over the last couple of years behind, besides being behind some really talented kids, was, just putting on size and mass. That's been a huge focus of this offseason. I know he was coming off a little bit of wear and tear in the spring, but I think he's made a huge effort to grow his body and be big enough to, survive. And I think the scheme with Tony is going to fit Danny. I really do. I think, again, there's more multiplicity in this defense, more movement, but a more slant angle type, vertical up the field mentality, which I think suits Danny. Then the second level, Omar Graham, and OG may not be a surprise, but Omar Graham, who had, I thought, a good year last year, in my opinion. OG quietly doesn't say much, but if you go back, even when I first got there, some guys just have a knack for finishing out the ball, maybe not an ideal size. He didn't have some of those things we're talking about with Daryl and Danny at the linebacker position, but he does have just a natural football IQ, an instinctual kid that, spends a lot of time with the game. I thought he really made a jump in each of the years he's been there, and I would expect him to make a huge jump. And again, just the way they're structured, in last year's scheme, those guys would be what I call fallback technique, where they would press the line of scrimmage to try to draw offensive linemen off, and they'd fall behind. So it was I don't want to call it a passive technique, but it was just maybe didn't allow kids like Omar, who are really athletic and explosive, to take advantage of that skill set. So I think OG at the second level. And then last but not least, Jabril Rawls. Jabril, when you talk about a dog mentality and just what you want out there in the back end, guys that have a short memory, guys that love to compete, guys that have a little something in their neck, as we always talk about. I think Jabril showed that last year on special teams. I have to go back and look a little closer at defensive snaps during the season, but I think he's made of all the right things. I think it's a young secondary for the most part at Florida State. So he's not, he's just as experienced as almost anybody else for the most part, not named Shaheem Brown. So I think Jabril is going to do big things. I think he's a spark plug for the defense. I think he has that, he vibrates at the right wavelength that he'll bring guys with him. So those are my three guys on defense. What about you? Who do you got?
Yeah, on defense, I'm going to go with the Williams brothers up front, and that's Amari Williams, who's making the transition from tight end to defensive end. I think Florida State's in a position where they probably need to make sure that he's playing on the defensive side of the ball as much as he can. I know he's a good receiver, was productive last year, and some accelerated action. He probably never should have played last year, but they were so bad. They played him on tight end. He did make a contribution, but I think in that jack position that this defense has under Tony White, I think Amari Williams is a guy that could have a breakout year. He's obviously comfortable with the speed of the game. Now he's just got to get better technically on that side of the ball and let loose. And I think he is a guy with where they are from a personnel standpoint at defensive end that is going to have a chance to have a breakout year. And listen, he's hard not to cheer for after what you saw him do last year. And it's hard not to predict him as a guy that could have a breakout year as a pass rusher. And listen, my other guy is James Williams, a transfer from Nebraska up front. He got the most pub coming in, which was interesting because he was not as productive as a guy named Deontay McCray, who also transferred in from Western Kentucky. The most productive out of those four defensive linemen they brought in was Deontay McCray, more productive than Williams, DeMonte Diggs, and then Jason Jenkins. But James is gotten another year under his belt in development. He's listed at 260. He was more of a pass rush specialist this year, so I think he's got a chance to have a breakout as a 3-down defensive lineman, not just a 3rd-down defensive lineman. So I'm going to go with the Williams brothers up front. I 100% agree with you on Omar Graham. This is a kid who really seemed to have the light come on, kind of like Darrell Jackson in the middle of last year. He was a kid that I don't think was a very good fit schematically for a 4-2-5. That's not his strength. I know he's athletic, but to me, he's more of an inside Mike linebacker. I don't know if you feel that way, Shane. But I do think he's going to be more productive in a 3 linebacker system more so than a 2 linebacker system. And I think that he is a kid that's just continued take a little while for his development to start showing itself, but certainly he's a kid that needs to have a breakout year at Florida State. And if he could, along with paired next to Elijah Herring, and I think it's going to be Blake Nicholson. I think he'll be the 3rd starter in the base defense. But I'm looking forward to seeing I agree with you, Omar Graham. And then on the back end, listen, I've been a fan of Quindarius Jones since out of that class that he signed with. He was my favorite player out of that entire class. And there's some really good players, but Q is long. He's athletic. I think he could play multiple positions in that backfield. He's 6'2", 192, going into his junior year. Listen, if somebody pops up that they feel is his equal at corner over on his side, I could see him rolling to safety. And then, of course, I think that Hussey's got a chance to be a guy that has a breakout year. He's a physical kid. He's kind of got to get it under control a little bit, but he's going to his junior year as well. So it's time for Q and Conrad to get going. And so those are going to be my 2 guys in the secondary on the defensive side of the ball. Then on the offensive side of the ball, Shane, I'm going to start with the offensive line. I know that they've got basically 5 guys penciled in as starters. You've got the 4 transfers that came in over the offseason, and I think those guys are going to all be penciled in to start entering camp. You've got the Pettis kid from Ole Miss, Gunnar Hansen at one tackle. You got Gunnar Hansen from Vandy at the other. You got Pettibone at center from Wake Forest. And then, of course, you've got the guard, Adrian Medley from UCF. Then you're going to add Richie Leonard. And we'll go ahead and pencil him in there because he was one of the kids that went to Charlotte for ACC kickoff. So I think those are probably going to be the 5 guys that start. But I do think they're very young and inexperienced behind those guys. Your TJ Ferguson was going to be the most experienced guy coming back with 450 or so snaps. He transferred out. So you're very inexperienced on the offensive line. I look for Andre Otto to make a push at one of the guard spots. He's a kid that a lot of people have been fired up about, 6'5", 330, redshirt sophomore, very athletic kid, Shane. I think it's time for him to take the next step. And then really the guy that I'm interested in seeing is the young offensive tackle, Lucas Simmons. He looks the part. He looks like an NFL tackle, 6'7", 311 pounds, redshirt sophomore season. Pettis and the kid from Vandy, Hansen, will go in as the starters. And Hansen, I think, is going to be the left tackle. I think Simmons will back him up. I think it's important that FSU has real competition for some starting spots, and if they need some of these young guys to start stepping up, start pushing people for playing time, and start being a part of a rotation. I don't know what Herb's philosophy is on rotating offensive linemen. Mike and Alex made a big deal out of having 7 or 8 offensive linemen that could play on any given Saturday, although later in last season that was issues. There's too many people playing. But I think those are my 2 guys up front. At tight end, I really think that that's a position that needs – it's kind of patchwork, right? You've got Randy Pittman, who's kind of a first pass catcher first, block if you have to type of guy. Chase Lofton, a freshman, is only going to be a pass catcher at 6'6", 220. He's not going to be into the line. So to me, the guy that really needs to step up or has the ability to be an all-purpose tight end, meaning he can block and run downs, be a unit tight end, a lead blocker as an H-back, and then obviously a threat as a pass catcher is Landon Thomas, 6'4", 234. So that's my guy at tight end. And then, listen, I'll take anybody at wide receiver. I mean, really the only, Squirrel Wright, the transfer from Tennessee, is the only guy that's highly productive or consistently productive over his career. Deuce Robinson has a lot of potential, 23 catches at USC last year, and our boy Bill Reagans went out to a practice in the spring and came out saying, "Pat, he's the real deal." So I'm gonna go with Robinson and McCoy as my breakouts at receiver. You got anybody on offense, Mike?
Yeah, I think, I want to go back and hit on Amari Williams here as we wrap up this conversation. You made me think of something. But, yeah, I'd say up front, Andre Otto, to me, just from my time there, I just loved everything about the kid, both from his makeup and mentality and the way he approached the game to just the athleticism, what I thought he could do from a physical standpoint on the football field. So really anxious to see him grow, right? He's just one of those guys, whatever his ceiling is going to be, I think he's going to hit it, right? I think some kids never hit their ceiling. I think Andre, he's the kind of young man that will. So really excited. I think he can play a lot of positions. I really thought he could be a D tackle if it had to come to it at one point. So extremely athletic and just a great kid. So Otto up front, at the second level, I really liked what Cam Davis did last year. And again, I'm going to call him, he's still a young guy. I know he got a lot of time last year, so people are familiar with the name, but I was impressed with Cam. I'm curious where he'll go in this offense and how he develops as a young player. And then outside, I really don't, I'm like you, I don't know what to expect from that group outside. The young guys that played last year really were not real impactful. You got the transfers coming in. So I'm going to say Squirrel, just because Squirrel has been in an offense that was somewhat similar to this and been highly productive in a great league. So I'm going to take Squirrel on the edge and see if he can create some plays and be a utility guy. And then Amari, what I want to say about Amari is it's interesting. Go back 10 years ago when Mac Brown got fired at Texas, shortly after his national championship. One of the knocks on Mac was he dominated Texas recruiting, which is usually a great thing to do. And they dominated way, far out ahead of the signing date. What I mean is sophomores would commit and maybe sometimes, young juniors. And at the time, there was a narrative that maybe those kids, they missed because they didn't develop the right way, so on and so forth. Now you jump ahead to Amari Williams, who kids are now reclassing at the line of scrimmage to enroll a year early to play in a really physical position. So it just makes me think some of this reclassification, depending on where you're going to play on the football field, I don't think always makes sense. I know everybody's in a race to get to college or race to get to the, the payday and whatever it might be. But I think that probably affected his play last year. You got a young kid who wasn't ready physically. And, I'm not sure how long you stay behind, but I think with a lot of young men who enroll early, that can be an issue.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see going back to what you said about Cam Davis, and we're going to do position breakdowns for Florida State after Mike's opening press conference of the preseason tomorrow, which I hope to be at with the guys from the Osceola. But listen, I think that's going to be interesting because once they brought in Sawchuk from Oklahoma, that room got really crowded along with Crowma coming in. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. So, yeah, listen, there's no doubt, Shane, with where this team is, for Mike to maximize this team's potential, which you hear Mike talk about a lot. I think some of these guys that have not had proven track records of production are some of these young kids